Namaskar, viewers. As a human being, our growth is in 4 or 5 stages. And as a small child to teenage to adolescent to youth to uh, elderly and then maybe elementary. But the turning point is always the transition from teenage to adolescent because that's where we pick up a lot of options in life and we decide our career path, also where we want to go as a professional and as a human being as well. So in this process, there are many challenges that we all of us have gone through, each one of us go through. And earlier there was no professional help available because we were following what our parents would dictate to us or decide for us. And then now also, on a lighter note, many people say that I never wanted to be like this, but I have become because my mother said that I want to be like this. So uh, that should not happen. And nowadays, with the globalization and modernization, children have more bigger world in front of them and they want to explore everything possible, and we as a parent or as a society want to facilitate the things for them and not become a dictator. So all this is something which we want to discuss. So to know more about it, let's talk to the expert than we making the decisions or guessing out of it. So I have a doctor and a philanthropic person with me today. So let me welcome Dr. Swati Vinchurkar. So Swagatam, madam.
Namaste.
Namaste. So Swati, Dr. Swati is first of all MD in pediatrics, and also she is working with special children. Now, what is that? They have a unit called Urja Child Development Center in Surat, Gujarat, and they have a multidisciplinary team, which is a therapist who kind of handhold or mentor the children to face the challenges that they go through in this transition. Dr. Swati is also president of Adolescent Health Academy, Surat, and there are some terminologies which I myself is not able to understand. So let's understand that from her. So let's get started. Doctor,
Sure.
first come first.
Hmm.
What do you mean when we say the adolescence mean?
So I think most of us have a difficulty in even saying the word adolescence
I
or
know.
adolescent.
I
So
hope I said
teen,
it correctly.
you did. So adolescence in very layperson terms, if you have to understand, it's teenage.
Hmm.
Okay, but it does not get restricted to the teen years. In our, in technical terms, if we see it, actually the process starts at around 9 years of age. We usually say that a child has become a teenager, but the developmental changes start to occur as early as 9 years of age, and they last right up to the age of 22 to 24. So if you see even the WHO definitions, it is not just restricted to 13 to 19. The early adolescence is from 9, 10, and 11 years. Then comes the actual adolescent, middle adolescence, what is called is from 12 years to 19 years or
Yes.
16 years in some
Yes.
cases.
Yes.
And then 16 years onwards is called the late adolescence. So adolescence is this whole spectrum of changes that is
Hmm.
happening.
Hmm. Doctor, everyone goes through this stage.
Yes,
For some, it is very smooth. For some, it is really challenging. And most of us are not aware of the physical and also the mental changes that we go through. Because earlier, we were little conservative society, or we can say reserved society, wherein many
yes,
things were not discussed in the family. And there was always an inquisitive angle to it that we wanted to
yes,
know, but we didn't know whom to ask. Uh,
very true.
so, what I want to ask next is let's talk from the medical point of view, first of all.
Hmm.
We see that very soon there is something called a vaccination thing which is developed for many
Yes,
categories. Children
yes,
go to school and suddenly they fall sick because the seasonal change, the weather change, and then one child got the cold and cough, and the whole class is suffering from it. So,
true.
how many vaccinations available in this age group of, let's say, 12 to 18?
So that's, I think, a very valid question, because most often parents forget about vaccinations after the age of 5. Till
True.
5 years, they are very, very diligent in
Mm.
getting their child vaccinated on time.
Mm.
They often forget the 10-year booster, the booster that the child needs for tetanus, and it is called the diphtheria booster, but the focus is on tetanus at that time as well. Pertussis we do not give after the age of 5, but tetanus and diphtheria is definitely given, and that should be given to all children at the age of 10.
Mm.
Along with that, a hepatitis B booster is recommended at the age of 10. And I'm saying 10 because 12 is not early adolescence. So I would want to focus on the 10-year vaccine as well. And hepatitis B, if the child has not received earlier, then it should be given as 2 doses at the age of 10.
Mm.
Along with that, in girls specifically,
Yes.
there is cervical cancer
Cervical
vaccine
cancer.
in
Yes.
very layperson terms, if I
Yes.
have to say, but it
Yes.
is actually the HPV, or the human papilloma virus vaccine, which also, if given before the age of 10, you just need to give 2 shots. But after that, you need 3 shots. Right. So the earlier the better, the lesser pricks for the child as well. And rubella also in girls is highly recommended. If you remember, there was an MMR campaign
Mm.
a few years ago, where all the schools in India,
Mm.
children were given MMR vaccine as a catch up, because we were seeing a lot of measles and mumps outbreaks. Rubella is important in girls primarily because if they get a rubella infection, it can affect their pregnancy and the fetus during pregnancy, and therefore this is a very vital vaccine. Uh, there are other vaccines which are optional, which something like meningococcal vaccine or yellow fever vaccine, which if you're traveling abroad, you may be required to take, and that should be taken only when you are recommended it. If the child is asthmatic, then an influenza booster every year is highly recommended. Otherwise, it's still an optional vaccine, but it should be considered for sure. So these are some of the basic vaccines that
Thank
need to
you.
be.
Now I have this gives rise to another question.
Hmm.
For example, the major vaccines like cervical cancer, etc. Um,
Yes.
are they going to cause any kind of a difficult side effects which we really need to get awareness about?
So, for whatever studies are available so far, it is safe,
Okay.
right? We have data for probably the last 15 years, not beyond before that, right? Because it has been launched around that time. So, the data that is available says that these are safe vaccines, and in fact, if you can prevent a human papilloma virus infection in one woman, it is going to be, like preventing cancer or the possibility of cancer in that woman lifelong, right? And that is something which I guess outweighs all, current available risk data. So it is a very safe vaccine that.
This is about the physical growth or safety
Yes.
messages that we spoke about. Now, the real challenge lies in the mental trauma and the different hormonal change that we go through and which we are not aware of or we don't understand why is it
Mm,
happening with me.
mm, mm,
I know that I have seen a number of girls during some of our activities when they get their first menstrual cycle, they cry out of hell saying that why me, why am I suffering? So reason being they possibly have not heard about it before, nobody has given them that education. So
yes.
what kind of changes boys go through is something you may want to tell, and then
Yes.
we will talk about girls later.
Right. So, all the changes that happen during adolescent age group are all pre-programmed, I would say. So, from the time that the child is born, the timing when the child is going to have an onset of puberty is all pre-programmed in the brain. That's the most fascinating science about it. And it is driven by the hormones, yes, but when the hormones will get released also happens at a specific time. So there will be changes in the child, and I'm going to first talk about both the genders, whether it's a boy or a girl, and then I'll focus on what changes you see in a boy. So there will be changes in the physical appearance of the child. There will be changes in the emotional state of the mind, that is the psychological
Yes.
changes.
Yes.
There will be changes in their social skills also, how they process their interactions with other peers or other people will also change. There will be a lot of career oriented changes expected of them, and therefore their ability to learn, their ability to pay attention to certain tasks, and their ability to participate in a lot more activities. All these things would be happening. Along with that, a slightly negative component that we do see in these children is the risk taking behaviors. These changes will suddenly come up during this phase. And that is because in this age group, the prefrontal cortex, which is the brake or the critical thinking area of our brain, is not matured yet. So, if we all know, the learning license is not given before the age of 16 years, and permanent driving license is not given before 18. The reason is that medically or physically, our brains have not developed or matured enough for the critical thinking to prevent risk-taking behaviors, overspeeding, or drug abuse, and therefore these things have come into place. Now, if I have to talk about boys specifically, the physical changes that you will see will be a change in the height. The first thing that you will notice is the growth spot. Around the age of 10, 11, they will seem shorter than the girls in their class. But as they reach the age of around 14, they will start to have a growth spot and they'll suddenly look leaner, lankier, and very awkward looking teenagers, the typical lanky teenager. They'll have a change in their voice, which will become a little more hoarse. It'll change. They'll also have a appearance of facial hair. Not just facial hair, they'll also have hair developing in their armpits and in the groin area and all over the body.
Yes.
Right. So these are the changes. Along with that, the skin will also become oilier, or they'll start getting more pimples or acne as their age progresses. And that's the same for boys as well as girls. Right. So these are the basic changes that we will see in boys. And in girls, what we fixate on, I would say, is the appearance of the first period. But that's not the only change that is happening. The child is growing into a woman, is what is typically said.
Yes.
But the changes are also similar to boys in a certain way, that they have appearance of their hair in the armpits and in the groin area. Okay. As the boys start developing night discharges or the white discharge, what it's not necessarily masturbation, but just a seminal discharge as their organs are developing. Similarly, the girl starts to have production of the ovarian egg in the follicles, and therefore she starts getting her first menstrual period. Okay, along with that, she'll also likely develop changes in the quality of her hair, oiliness of the skin.
Yes. Yes.
They will have a lot of, both girls or boys will have a lot of body image issues in this
Yes.
age group,
Yes.
right? Which they often constantly would be comparing with peers. And now with social media, everything has to be perfect. There are
Perfect.
no
Yes.
filters in real life.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So, but they do expect the same. So,
True.
body image issues come up, eating disorders can, affect them, or their habits are formed at this time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, even, just the first cigarette smoke or
Mm.
the first drink, if they try at this age,
Mm.
these are such addictive things that they are very likely to become addicted lifelong.
Mm.
So it is important to talk about these changes, that कुछ नहीं होता है, that
Ah. Ah.
attitude, it's very natural. But if they are educated early on why it is not okay,
Mm.
and कुछ तो definitely होता है, this, if they are aware and they become empowered to prevent those behaviors, then it helps them lifelong. So these are some of the basic changes. And along with that, masturbation
Mm.
is something which does come up naturally. at this age, whether it is boys or even
Or
girls.
girls. Yes.
It is not that explored in girls because there's a lot of stigma associated with it, probably, but we are just not talking about it.
Yes.
It is equal in boys and girls, and it is not wrong. It is not harmful to the body or the mind in any way, but yes, they need to be educated why masturbating, where masturbating is okay, right? And sexual activity or risk taking behavior related to masturbation also needs to be educated. Now, if the children are already aware about it, then they'll not be asking more questions, but they will actually be working on themselves properly. So these are some of the changes that you would see. Just one note, in the menstrual cycle, when the girls have the onset of their first period, that is called as menarche. Okay. And menarche, the onset after that, for 2 years, they may have irregular periods.
Yes.
They may have some pain. They may have,
Some kind
some
of
puffiness of the body.
yes.
Those are changes which can be managed very well with good exercise and good diet. Okay. But PCOD is something which girls are alone going to be affected. It's, there is an equivalent in boys, but PCOD is something which needs to be, screened for at this age and managed early on. So polycystic ovarian disease or polycystic ovarian syndrome needs to be looked at, even if the girl is having irregular or infrequent periods in the first 2 years, which could be natural, right? And then they have regular periods. So this is something that they need to look at.
Okay. Now, my question to you: you are in this profession for some time now. As a layman, I feel these problems were not as intense or as big, maybe 15 to 20 years back, but now they are more prominent. Or is my understanding wrong that they were not documented or they were not discussed that openly, but they were there? And now, since we are talking about it, so we are aware about it. What is your observation?
Technically, if we see the number of accidents or suicides or sexuality related issues, whether you call it sexual abuse or physical abuse, all these things have grown up as per the population is growing.
Yes.
Probably the incidence was not as much earlier because it was not documented as well. Again, we have become a more receptive or a more educated society now. So if a girl in the family becomes a victim of sexual abuse, or even a boy becomes a victim of abuse, we would be more open to reporting it and bringing the perpetrator to justice, which earlier was kind of just hidden away. As simple as, like my daughter would be okay to talk about what brand of sanitary pad needs to be purchased to her dad as well. Which earlier was a topic, like even if an ad was coming on the TV screen, probably my mom would change it, she would surf to another channel. So that level of, I think, education and openness is needed. It does not need to be glorified, it isn't like we don't want to stand in the middle of the square and talk about it just for the sake of it. Right. But to raise awareness or being okay with it, talking, having a period is not a stigma. Is what each and every parent, I'm not saying mother, each and every parent, be it the father or the mother, and every husband to be also needs to be aware of. Aware of it. True. So every member of the society should consider this a very physiological phenomenon, which is going to happen during the childbearing phase, right? And anything going wrong during this time is going to be a lifelong issue for the whole family. So it needs to be addressed timely, right? So yes, the stigma has gone down, reporting has gone up. So it's not that the incidence has suddenly increased. Yes, I would say the age of sexual experimentation or the age of the age of trying out sexual activity has gone down a little bit, maybe because of exposure to
Social
media.
media, internet.
Yes.
Yes,
And, and the permissiveness also, I would
true,
say.
true, true.
But that is where we need to be really, really cautious, that a younger age group person experimenting sexually, they do not understand the emotional or the psychological connotations lifelong. And that
And
is something.
also,
Hmm.
sorry to interrupt, but in this
No.
context, I want to add something.
Hmm.
Also, it is okay to share everything with the children, or it is okay to show them this so that they don't ask more questions. This
Correct.
is somewhere very little dangerous, is I feel.
And there is a very fine line between how you present this data material.
Mm,
It is okay. I will also say that it is okay to share everything with the children, but it should be age appropriate content.
exactly.
And I think that is where the role of medical professionals or psychologists would come
Yes,
into
yes,
play, or
yes,
even the teachers, if they
yes.
are trained to present the data at the right time,
Mm,
the children are less likely to ask more difficult questions. They are going to ask questions, but they'll ask the at it at the right time. Also, they would get the correct educated scientific answers, and that is going to be very important. So yes, even a 3-year old, I am going to talk about good touch and bad touch. But here, something which all parents need to learn, especially the new parents who have a 3-year-old daughter, please do not talk to them about PP and susu and like talk with technical terms. So call the penis a penis, call the vagina a vagina. It is just like any other part of the body.
yeah.
Okay, you don't need to show them OMG2 for that matter, but you can be that God person for them and teach them correct terminologies. So just as you would take pride in showing off your 1.5, 2-year old saying, "Oh, show me your nose," and the child touches the nose. Please teach them the correct terminology for the private parts also. And thereby you will be able to prevent a lot of mishaps later on. So that's how age appropriate content needs to be delivered to all
Okay.
the
Doctor, one more thing that is happening prominently,
children.
and I want you to mm, discuss this point more elaborately, is uh, the generation before and the generation now I'm talking about.
Hmm.
I'm not blaming anyone for that matter. It's just the reality, and we need to face it and we need to deal with it.
Hmm.
Nowadays, I see there is a lot of mental weakness, a lot of psychological disorder, and a lot of uh, peer pressure, or I would say unnecessary comparison, which is bringing down their moral and their confidence. And they are becoming extremely vulnerable section to get trapped into something without any reason. So,
Yes.
parents definitely play a vital role here. However, now with the commitments to the profession is also increasing day by day, and we are not here to do any moral policing, but they are not able to give the as much as time as the earlier generation was able to give. But with
Yes.
this, children are not sure where to go and whom to ask. So to
Very.
them, how would you educate?
So this is a very, very crucial aspect of their development, the psychological or the emotional well-being of our children is something which we rarely address till something bad happens. Right. And yes, the resilience, I would say, all these things, where they are mentally weaker, or that's what our generation has started saying, that the coming generation is not as mentally strong.
Yes.
Again, there it is a double-edged sword, like, yes, the existing generation has advanced as far as the technology is concerned, but their social interactions have become very superficial to a certain extent. If
True.
you
True.
have to compare,
True.
the bonding and the family systems,
Mm,
all said and done, were very strong backups,
mm,
moral backups or social backups or mental backups, which somebody, some neighboring mossy also could come and comfort you sometimes. I'm not saying that was a foolproof method. Suicides still happen during those times. But nowadays, if it's a very sad statistic that out of all the suicides that happen in the world, India itself is alone responsible for 7 lakh plus suicides per year. And out of that, a major chunk is
This age group.
late teens or early adults. And that is very, very sad.
Very sad. Absolutely.
It is not just related to their mental resilience, but yes, if we could teach them mental resilience, it will help prevent at least some of these situations. We as a society, yes, need to get away from the rat race. But having said that, every parent whose child comes into grade 8 or 9 is going to switch into that rat race immediately. What next? There are very few parents who can sit back and say, I'll let my child do what the child wants to do the best. Okay. So as parents, this is our first responsibility. Stop comparing. This is very cliched. I think we all have heard this many times. Stop comparing. But how do you stop comparing? By accepting your child, identifying the child's strengths and weaknesses early on. When the child is in grade 4 or 5, there will be some things that the child is doing much better than the others. Even special children have that, like it's not just typically developing children. So every child has that spark which we should pick up and try to build up upon that. Okay. Every child doesn't need to get into a coaching center for pre-medical or pre-engineering entrance exams. And even if they get into that, it is okay not to be in the top 300 in the country.
Top 5, yeah.
Right. But being okay is always retrospective wisdom.
I know.
Each of us, when we are passing through that phase, still get stressed out about it. So first we need to work on ourselves. As far as building up mental resilience in students is concerned, I think we should start very early on, talking about social emotional learning, even in the toddlers, pre-primary, primary and secondary sections will be very useful. As far as talking to youth is concerned, I'm very proud to say that here in Surat, we started as a part of the Parenting for Peace initiative and Adolescent Health Academy initiative. We started something what is called as YOLO, You Only Live Once program, which is a program to help the youth, all college students. So we go and address college students in batches of a classroom or the whole unit, where we are talking about how to identify signs of mental health issues and how to work upon them, whether it is yourselves or your friend. And probably this can be a good way of peer training. If we can train one group of peers, they can exponentially add to that skill in many others. Instead of just telling them don't do this, don't do that, I would rather say we focus on telling them how to do something correct instead of not doing something wrong. So teaching them mental resilience, but the techniques of being resilient is something which we work on. And that is a program which, like we are doing this thing online, can be done online. It can be that speakers can get trained, or they can develop their own module, and they can build upon that. But every school, every college and every parent should be equipped to identify signs of emotional or psychological distress in their children. It should not become just a news on the media. It should be something which, if we can prevent even one death, I think that itself would be very, very important.
Good achievement. Yes, definitely.
Yes.